to the presentation, but the language is important. And so we talked very briefly about the culture, but this body of 22 countries, yes, this body of 22 countries is, would form what you would call the Arab world. And I was asked specifically to speak about this because many people are not aware of the history. So in a nutshell, really quick, 22 countries, Egypt is the largest in terms of population. We're talking 80 million plus in terms of population. So by far it's the largest, most populous Arab country, followed by Algeria, not anywhere close. We're talking like 38, 40 million people. So Egypt does play a great role. Algeria, as well as other countries, they follow. There's a very important thing that happened in 1946. There was whole rise of we are Arabs. Let's acknowledge that we all have similar backgrounds and stuff. Let's come together and form an organization in 1946 called the Organization for Arab Countries. Then that gave rise to nationalism. So the whole idea of that we should be very proud as Arabs, and we're different than Persians, and we're different than Turks, and we're different than all these other ethnicities. So 1952, you have a revolution in Egypt by Gamal Abdel Nasser, and then, that gives rise to, a whole new scene that is coming to play here. Many other countries, they follow in the same footsteps, and they have other revolutions as well. They're doing away with monarchy, kings and queens, and they're bringing presidents and republics. That is the variable here, and that happens around 1952. So we have a whole period all the way up to 1967, where we have what is so-called as the Six-Day War. Israel captures Jerusalem. So the Arab world is in great disappointment, is in shock. There's a whole downfall of this whole idea of nationalism. This nationalism thing is not working out very well, and people are, lost what is to them the heart of the Arab and the Islamic world, at least in that part. Aside from Mecca and Medina, the third Qibla, Jerusalem. But I want to stop here for a second and ask you, we replace these monarchs and these kingdoms and so on, at least for the most part, we still have some, with now presidents and republics. So who came to play here? The army did it. So unlike this revolution that we just watched, the 10-minute clip, this is not the people on the street, this is the army. So now we have a whole new variable. Who is going to play a major role? The army. From 1952 all the way up to 1967, the army loses. We lost Jerusalem. We conceded like a big, at least a sizable, real estate, the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, as well as the Golan Heights in Syria, and so on and so forth. So now we're looking for a new identity. We don't know what to do. In 1967, this nationalism thing did not work. We do some soul searching, and we go back to our roots. What gives us izzah? What gives us, dignity? What gives us honor? And remember the words of Umar ibn al-Khattab when he says that the izzah in Islam, this honor is in Islam, and so on. And only within 6 years, there is a new war called the Yom Kippur War, or Day of Atonement, where the Syrians and the Egyptians were able to regain some of this land that was captured, and there was a whole new sort of comeback for the Arabs. So that is a very, very important history that needs to be acknowledged. What I mean by this, or what I intend by this, just give you the background, so you can understand that from the 50s all the way up to 2010 and 11, we didn't have any change. So you understand the level of frustration. People did not have, you have military rulers, as well as some kings and some monarchies that did survive. So imagine with me, 1952 all the way up to 2010 and 11, almost 60 years of no change. People who were born, and many of them died, seeing zero change on the ground. They never had a vote, they were never represented, they never were able to speak their mind, they were never able to achieve their dreams, they were never able to do many of these things. So you have to understand where this frustration is coming from, and the fact that it was building up over the years, many years. So with this, we can now address the idea of what started this whole thing. So there are some causes and some means of change that we're going to come to address. But just in terms of history, we have to mention a couple of these things. We have to mention that there were some grievances, at least on the surface, that led to this explosion. All of a sudden, you see, what happened to Egypt? I just visited last year. People on the streets in millions. What happened? What happened to Tunisia? I just talked to people there a few months ago. Everything was fine. Things were calm. This is such a sudden change. It was not a sudden change. It was building. And, until it reached this level of explosion that you see in these videos and other videos online. So far, so good. Are you guys with me? Okay, the history is important for you guys to understand, where we're going to. We have to know where we're coming from, right? Very important. So stay with me. If you have any questions, if you can hold them, fine, unless, there is maybe even a correction or something that, a burning comment, feel free to jump in, but rather maybe you wait till the end. What started this whole thing is one man. And what started this whole thing is in one place. That is in Tunisia. In the city of, southern city of Tunis, called Bouzaid. There was a man named Muhammad Bouazizi. Muhammad Bouazizi was a street vendor. He would sell fruits and veggies and so on and so forth. And he would go every day as a college grad who was unable to find a job and suffered from many years of unemployment. He is under the pressure to support his family as the man of the household and as what Islam and the culture dictates for him to do. So he goes out one day and on the streets of this small city in Tunis, and he tries to sell his stuff, and because he does not have a permit and he has no means of acquiring a permit, and because of the level of corruptions to go and get a permit, he has to pay off so many people and bribe so many people, he could not get that permit. He was kicked out of his spot and he was insulted, even slapped by a female cop in front of everybody in the market, in front of everyone in the bazaar. He was insulted to the greatest extent. So he goes to complain. He goes to complain to the precinct, local precinct. He goes to talk to the people. Anyone who could lend him something. He feels hurt. He feels insulted. He's not only the fact that he's unable to earn a living is one thing, but he's unable to earn a living and he is debased. He is humiliated in front of people. And that caused this turmoil and this explosion within this person, Muhammad Bouazizi, and he tried to do everything to express his feelings. He tried to do anything to air the grievance that he has, but it all fell on deaf ears because the system doesn't work. And because of this, Muhammad Bouazizi was left with no choice but to express his utmost level of frustration and set himself ablaze, set himself on fire, just as means of protesting this miserable condition that and this miserable experience that he went through. Obviously in Islam it's not the right thing to do, it's actually the wrong thing to do, it's haram to do that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him 2 weeks to live, and we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this person, that the 2 weeks would be time for him for tawbah and repentance. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept him amongst those who repented, and may his sacrifice be another spark in other places, as you'll come to see, at least in 2 places. Other people were very frustrated by what happened, and they started rioting, and the whole thing led from the small cities, the villages, all the way up to the capital of Tunisia, and you know what happened after that. One second, we'll go back to this one really quick. It's important to mention another individual, Khalid Said in Alexandria, Egypt. Another issue, major grievance, he was beaten to death by plainclothes cops because he had videos that would bring charges against them because they were corrupted and taking bribes and stuff like that, and he was trying to fight the system. And because of this, he was stripped of any rights whatsoever, civil or otherwise, and he was actually beaten to death. And that was one of the things that sparked a whole protest online and petition and so on, and Facebook page was dedicated to him. 80,000 people, I checked that Facebook page myself, 20,000 people on the 22nd of January, 80,000 people on the 25th of January. Almost the viewers who committed to going out on the street to protest on the day of the 25th and so on. There's a Libyan prison called Muslim prison. 1,200 people were shot to death. You know, 1/4 of them were memorized the Quran. It's interesting to note that 1/4 of the Libyan population are memorizers of the Quran, Huffaz of the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Interesting, you know, I want you to understand where things are coming from, where this conviction and this, you know, steadfastness and this sacrifice and the whole, you know, philosophy of Shahada come from. You have to understand where these people come from. This was just a spark on the surface, but we discussed, you know, the other issues, and we'll go straight to that. So causes and means, as you can tell, there's a great deal of overlap and similarities, yes, but the root cause is not just that, what we just mentioned, Bouazizi and Khalid Saeed and others and Muslim prison. And these were, again, things on the surface. They did spark a great deal of protest, but these were the things on the surface, and that's what you need to remember. We have to understand the root causes. And I did not want to separate these two things, the causes and the means, because many things, especially what we're just about to discuss for the next 10 minutes, they actually two sides to the same coin. Certain things were a cause, and the protesters and the people ended up using it as means of change. You understand the relationship? So we'll come here to talk about for the very first thing. Yes, it started with Bouazizi and started in Tunis, and yes, that is all factual and that is all correct. But no change takes effect and takes place except by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the will of the people in changing themselves grants them permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change their own condition. As the ayah in Surah Al-Ra'd says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to change the condition of people unless they change that which is within themselves. So the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one, Allah, the one who casted this fear in the hearts of these oppressive rulers. There was a great deal of suspicion whether or not bin Ali of Tunis was going to flee the country. The more possible scenario that he was going to dig in deep, like Gaddafi is doing right now, and not flee the country and, you know, suppress these protests and so on and so forth. But the unlikely scenarios for him to flee, there was a great deal of pressure, yes, but no other Arab ruler fled his country or, you know, called it quits and just took off. It just didn't happen for the past 60 years. So 60 years of no change, and all of a sudden this thing happens. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Surah Al-Ahzab, وَقَذَفَ فِي قُلُوبِهِمُ الرُّعْبَ. He's the one who casted this fear in their heart. فَرِيقًا تَقْتُلُونَ وَتَأْسِرُونَ فَرِيقًا. And then it's very, very important for us to understand that this is part of the... Okay, we'll try to go a little faster in the next 5 minutes, inshallah. This is very important to understand because that plays a great role